Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to In Conversation With, which is the new title we're trying to give to these interviews that I'm doing and we are doing on Zoom. It's a little less negative than to say that we're in a pandemic, which we are, of course. And that's one of the reasons, but not the only reason, that I'm talking to my next guest, who is the man at the top of the UKinbound, which is the membership organisation for all of our tourism businesses that want people to come back and visit us again. And obviously at the moment they're not. So good afternoon, Joss Croft.
Hello, Graham, and hello to everyone who's listening in.
Good. Joss, we're almost, give a damn, 6-7 weeks away, a year into this pandemic now. And throughout that year, I know that you and many of your colleagues in the industry have been pressurising the government to recognise the importance of inbound tourism, to recognise the importance of the tourism industry, but it seems to have fallen on deaf ears most of the time. I know you did you took a bus that didn't say we're going to give £350 million a week back to the NHS once we leave the EC, but it had something similar on the side of that. Didn't seem to have any effect either. Have you basically given up on that now?
Well, I mean, it's a very, very unsettling and disappointing situation we find ourselves in. I mean, first things first, I don't give up, Graham. I don't intend to on this one. And, to a certain degree, success can be just simply hanging on and keep on bashing on that door. So that's what we're going to be doing. I mean, we have had some successes. We're hopeful that we'll hear some noises in the next couple of weeks from Scotland in terms of them supporting their DMC network, the DMCs and tour operator network. But yeah, there's some really big gaps. And I think a lot of that actually stems from, a very significant lack of understanding about what tourism is. And that's despite all the hard work that everyone puts in, not just us, but everyone. I don't think that necessarily government really understands, or everyone within government, be that officials or ministers, really understands what tourism is. It's our 5th largest export. It's bigger than aviation. It's bigger than automotive. I mean, goodness only knows it's about 100 times bigger than fishing. And yet we just don't have that understanding. And I think a lot of the time politicians kind of confuse tourism with hospitality or aviation, and they don't really look under the bonnet and recognize that, over 50% of the people that are coming into this country use an intermediary. If we don't have a functioning intermediary environment and ecosystem, then the overseas operators who need DMCs and intermediaries will switch their business as well. So, I mean, we're not given up by any means. And as I say, I think we will shortly hear some positive news from Scotland, but we keep on pushing on rates. We're pushing on testing. We've just submitted our Tourism Resilience Fund, which was the one you mentioned with the bus, which was actually £457 million a week that the UK is not earning when international tourists aren't here. So we're continuing with our MP engagement. We continue with our media engagement. But as I say, a lot of industries are businesses about the job losses. But I think in today's climate, that's not really strong currency with government, because they recognise that in a global pandemic, there will be business failure, there will be large unemployment. So what we've got to do is try and impress upon them the fact that we need a functioning infrastructure and ecosystem, so that when the travel does recover, which inevitably it will recover, we're in a place to get our share of international business.
Do you think, just take one of those issues for a moment. I've been in the tourism industry probably as long, if not longer than you. And in that time, I think that I have experienced a different minister of tourism, on average about one every 18 months. And in all of that time, I personally, although I've never really voiced it at a great high level, have said that the government doesn't recognise tourism, exactly the words you've used. And the conclusion I've come to virtually every time is that, unfortunately, the tourism industry is very, very conservative with a small c, and is not particularly radical. So do you think that to a certain extent the reason that government doesn't recognise tourism is the fact that the tourism industry is not as radical as, say, agriculture or fisheries, or is not as emotive as food? Is it our fault, in effect, people that are in the industry? Is it our fault rather than people in government?
Oh, it's difficult. I mean, at the moment, we've got a good civil service team within DCMS, which is the department that's responsible for tourism. The problem is not really DCMS. The problem is that at the moment, and particularly with this government, and particularly with this pandemic, that all roads lead to the Treasury and lead to number 10. So I think that's one of the elements. There's another element that sat behind it, which is, as I say, it is complex. Tourism is quite complex in terms of the way that it's built and the different layers that you get between retailers and operators. So I think the complexity is another element that sits behind it as well. It's also the fact that we don't have the big spokespeople, Graham, as well. We're not the arts and culture that have got the big lovies that can talk about their industry, that really grab those headlines. I think maybe there's an element of slight condescension in it as well, that tourism jobs are always seen as a little bit of fun, if you like. They're not really taken as seriously. It's an industry that is great for people to come in at a very low level and work their way up to the top, but it's not the jobs that you need your PPE from Oxbridge to join in order to be successful in tourism. So maybe there's an element of that behind it. But as I say, I think at the moment, that there's an argument, there's a big call amongst many industry players for a minister for hospitality. Our minister isn't even the minister for tourism. He's got several other elements of his portfolio as well. And there'd been an argument, is it better for tourism to sit within DCMS, or is it better within BEIS, or is it better within the Foreign Office or within DIT? And it's the fact that it's a complicated industry. You've got inbound, which would make you lean towards FCO or DIT, but then you've got domestic, which probably sits with BEIS. So there's a whole raft of reasons, and to a certain degree, Graham, my view would be I don't think it matters where it sits. And I don't think, it's no good just to accept the fact that they don't understand tourism and don't recognise it. I think it's incumbent upon everyone who works in tourism to be shouting, to be writing to their MPs about the support, about the gaps in support. And, we have to take an element of responsibility ourselves and not accept this situation.
I think the thing is that I find this subject matter interesting because virtually every other question I'm going to ask you in this interview, I think that we would be speaking more positively if there was someone at cabinet level that did understand tourism, and when everybody surrounds the table at number 10 on a Monday morning, goes through things, is able to thump the table and say, this is not good enough, this is the consequences. But the only way that we would get there is actually to be more radical in what we do in order to get there. And you say we don't have the lovies, we don't, but there are a number of prominent people in the tourism and travel industry. People might not like him, but we have the man at the top of Ryanair. People might not like him, but we have the man at the top of Virgin Atlantic. All of those people are very, very well known. And there's an awful lot of people, celebrities, that make travel programs going around the UK on trains around Scotland or go off to other places. My personal opinion is that, for example, if it was farmers that we were talking about, they would now have their tractors surrounding Heathrow and no one be able to get in or out. That probably might not matter during a pandemic. But even in normal times, they would be much more radical and militant, if you like, to use the word militant, about what they do in order to get their message across. And we, as an industry, don't. We want to do a Twitter storm in order to get our message across. But this interview is not about me, it's about you, and it's about UKinbound. So I'll drop that one and say to you that, we are in a pandemic. The UK is third worst in the world in terms of deaths against percentage of population. We've also left the EU. Do you think that work is needed on brand Britain?
Undoubtedly, it's a subject that's really close to my heart, actually. And pandemic, Brexit or not, you need to be out there marketing a destination. And again, people might imagine that people are going to continue to come to the UK for years and years and years without any proactive brand marketing about what a fantastic place the UK is. And that's not the case because our competitors aren't inactive. In fact, a lot of them are active in market at the moment, and the UK is simply not active in market. There's arguments for both sides of that. But you need to be proactively moving forward, because if you're not moving forward and your competition is, then you're effectively going backwards. So yes, we need to. I had a quick look at some of the Nations Brand Index, which kind of ranks countries according to various criteria. And actually, the UK does very well overall. The criteria aren't all tourism criteria. Some of them are around inward investment and governance and that type of thing. But generally, we do very, very well on that. I think in tourism, we're 4th or 5th, which is fantastic. And I actually saw that welcome, and this was a study that was undertaken last year, we'd actually moved up a couple of places. Now, my feeling is that's a statistical anomaly, because, you know, ever since 2012 and the fantastic Olympic Games and the showcase that was, where we were able to really promote welcome in the UK, we were at 10th, and then we slipped down over the various years until we were about 16th, and now we've just seen a little bit of an uplift again up to 11th place, which is great. But, you know, within that, we also know that the perceptions of the UK have been massively impacted by Brexit in some markets, not all markets, Graham. If you move outside the European Union, most people don't really understand or know much about Brexit, and that doesn't have an overview in terms of their feelings about the UK. But I was chatting to a guy this week who'd been doing some travel agent and tour operator training for Korean agents and operators. And he said that actually the way in which the UK has managed the COVID pandemic has had a real impact on their positive perceptions for the UK as well. So we've kind of got that double whammy of, you know, the UK always promoting itself as open, tolerant and welcoming. And I think we've really had a bit of a hit because of the two elements of Brexit and indeed COVID. Now, of course, it's also interesting because, you know, the UK has pushed out a message around, you know, the Great Campaign. And I was very much involved in that. I was involved in its development in 2011, and then I was using it when I was marketing director at Visit Britain. And then I was using it when I was the marketing director for the Department for International Trade, for trade and investment terms. And when that first came out, there was a lot of reticence amongst Brits about the UK shouting about how great we were. In actual fact, when you surveyed people internationally what they thought about that campaign, they loved it. And indeed, those people who saw the campaign were more than twice as likely to come to the UK as those who didn't. So it was a big success. And we need that type of coordinated approach, something with confidence, something that's really trying to get the message across around the fact that we are a fantastic country, because notwithstanding, you know, the highest death rates or the third highest death rates, there's some real positives about this country, whether it's our creativity, our innovation, you know, the science and technology. It is an Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that a lot of people are pushing out at the moment. So there's some real positives out there, but we can't stand still. And yes, I think there is a certain element of damage to our brand at the moment, but the only way of getting out of that is by really telling an authentic truth about the UK, which is that we're still a fantastic destination to travel to. Good.
Presumably, if we had someone in the cabinet, we would be able to push that very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the UK government, and I'm not that close to it anymore, but I know that they will be considering what to do. There is a slight tension, though, about promoting the UK as a destination at the moment when we've got such restrictive entry criteria. And you can understand why they might not be willing to push the UK, knowing that people aren't going to be able to travel at the moment. But I'd say that there's a big difference between a tactical campaign, which is about getting people to travel now, versus a brand or image campaign, which is trying to raise the awareness and raise positive perceptions around the UK. And we probably need to be doing the latter at the moment, and then the former in due course.
Given the past 9 to 12 months of COVID and pandemic and transport policies, and given that we are rolling out vaccine, and thank goodness for our scientists with the Oxford vaccine that can be stored in a normal fridge, etc., what advice would you give to the man in charge of these air corridors, etc., as to how we should get out of this? What's the next step? Say by everybody's saying by the middle of the year, the vast majority of people should have been vaccinated. what should he do, and do you have any confidence that it'll be done properly?
Well, I think to the first point, in terms of of the corridors and the introduction of pre-departure testing, most of the industry has been calling for pre-departure testing since about April, May of last year, Graham. So it's nothing new, and I very much do welcome the introduction of pre-departure testing, because it moves the narrative on from solely being about stopping people coming into the country, or people coming into the country and then having to quarantine for a long period of time. So when we first heard that there was going to be an announcement of the pre-departure testing, I think we were all delighted. Then we were slightly taken back when it was in addition to, and not instead of, the quarantine, the 10-day quarantine or the 5-day test to release scheme. So I think certainly one of the key messages for government has to be, and again, this is where we talked earlier on around the knowledge of tourism, recognizing that it's in the next 6 to 8 weeks that people are going to be booking their summer holidays, depending on the way in which the vaccine rollout goes. We need to be getting out a message that the introduction of pre-departure testing in association with the 5-day test to release or the 10-day quarantine is a temporary measure. We need to signal that to international audiences that later on in the year, we will be open, we will be welcoming, people will be able to have a great time here, but we've really got to get that message out at the period of time that people are making their bookings. If we wait until late May, for example, when the vaccine has been rolled out, and then we start to say, well, we're going to be removing this in due course, we'll have missed the summer season. That will then effectively be 4 or 5 winters in a row, and just unsustainable for businesses to be able to manage that as well. So I think that's really, really key, is that we've got to get that message out there as well. I think there's another element as well that, we can get very, very obsessed about the fact that we are the per head of population, I think we're the 4th largest number of vaccinations that we're doing. Vaccinations in this country isn't going to be good enough for inbound tourism. We need vaccination rollouts in our key source markets. So we need to see the US being successful, Germany, India, China being successful in their vaccine rollout programs. And also then, if we are going to be relying on people having been vaccinated or even on the pre-departure testing, we've got to have some type of international cooperation as well, because who's to know which tests are valid and which aren't? And there's elements such as a digital health passport. Could we be using that that's internationally recognized, that really gives people the confidence that if they have been vaccinated, they will be able to travel? I think rather than necessarily politicians driving that, it may well be that the private sector are driving that because they want to get a competitive advantage. So they're the ones that are insisting that you need to have a vaccination, and they'll support you in order to be able to do that. So I think there's, there are some positives, but we've really got to be making sure that this is done a lot quicker and a lot more internationally focused as well, rather than just the UK doing it at the moment as well.
And so your confidence levels on this being done?
I'm probably best not to get drawn on my confidence levels, that it will be managed efficiently. But having said all of that, as I say, we have seen some movement, but we've got to see quicker movements. And it is all about instilling confidence in international visitors to come to the UK. And whether that's ministers, whether that's the trade themselves, or whether that's the private sector that is driving this, I don't think it matters, but we've got to get that confidence out there.
Okay, final question, Joss. With this new world, I wouldn't say the new norm, but this new world that we are approaching of post-vaccine, post-pandemic, do you think it's an opportunity not only to, and I repeat the message because I think it's an important one, to get someone, he or she, at cabinet level to argue the corner of tourism, be it inbound or outbound for that matter? Do you think it's an opportunity to almost reboot the industry, to have a look at the practices that have been used, the business models, the sustainability, the over-tourism that some areas a number of people would be desperate for over-tourism at the moment, but my point is that those are pitfalls that we potentially could avoid in the future in this new world.
You could almost flip that round a little bit, Graham, by saying, if tourism, and to your point around, kind of cabinet engagement, what are the key government priorities at the moment? Obviously, there's the economic recovery and there's the vaccine management and managing this terrible health situation that we've got at the moment. But moving over and above that and returning more to kind of everyday politics, if you like, the discussions that I've been having with government have focused very much around sort of three key areas. The first of which is global Britain, Britain's competitive place within the world. Now, tourism has a massive role to play in that. We know that there are links between people who come to the UK on holiday and trade and investment. If you've been to the UK, you're more likely to invest. If you're investing, you're more likely to trade. If you're trading, you're more likely to send your kids to be educated here as well. So tourism is one of those pillars of kind of global Britain. So I think the UK has a fantastic part to play, and tourism has a fantastic part to play within that. The next of which is the levelling up agenda. And you hear this when you talk to politicians. One might wondered whether it might have gone cold, but again, discussions that I've had with top politicians in the past couple of weeks really cemented that this levelling up agenda in terms of driving regional economies in the UK is massively important to them. Tourism has a huge role to play there. It is the DMCs, the intermediaries, who are driving these programs across the whole of the UK. It's making successful rural businesses in Scotland and in Wales and in the north of England. So I think that's another real kind of, arrow in our quiver that we can be using as well. And the last one is the government's focus around sustainability and the green industrial revolution. And that is more of a challenge for us involved in travel and tourism, because it requires the movement of people. So I think it's going to have to be a focus on that. Sustainability isn't going to be going away, and whether that's driven by government policy or by new generations coming through. If I look at my children, other than their complete inability to turn off a light bulb, they are quite sustainably minded. So I think we do need to recognize that this is not something that's going to go away and will conceivably become more and more important as we move forward. If you take sustainability in its kind of wider sense, I was always taught to look at kind of 4 elements of sustainability, which is the VICE acronym. It's not as interesting as it sounds, Graham, but bear with me. So it's around kind of visitor satisfaction. So we've got to make sure that when visitors come here, there's fantastic product. And, of course, it's a given that it needs to be COVID secure now, but also trying to make sure that people have got the fantastic experiences that they would normally get. You've then got the I, which stands for industry profitability. We've got to make sure that the industry is profitable, otherwise people simply won't sell, and then destinations become less sustainable, not more sustainable as well. We've got to get community acceptance, and some of that is understanding the true economic and job benefit of tourism as well. And the last one is the environmental element as well. So we've got to make sure that we're getting all of these factors right for us to be a fully sustainable destination. And I think the first bit in terms of the visitor satisfaction we need to do, I was always told that tourism is all about means, motivation and money. Now, of course, there's concerns about kind of, global consumer confidence and disposable income. I think actually people are saying that actually bank balances are in a pretty healthy state at the moment for quite a few people. So we've got the money. The motivation goes back to the piece around Brand Britain that we talked about being an exciting destination that people want to see this year, not in 10 or 15 or 20 years as well. And in terms of the means, yes, then it is about, we've talked again about that, about in terms of being able to have access through our borders easily, safely, and without any hassle or cost. So I think those are really important elements. And if we can get that aligned with proper sustainability, then I think travel and tourism has a very, very bright future.
Good. Well, it's interesting that, there's some good research in America about what they call the halo effect of tourism, in that if many people will go on holiday somewhere and then they'll decide to set up a business or move their business there. That's interesting. And obviously, satisfied visitors, that it would increase their propensity to spend more when they're in destination as well. But Joss, it's been, as always, an interesting chat, one that I always enjoy. And I wish you the very, very best of luck in your negotiations. And I hope that by the next time we speak, we'll have a Secretary of State for Tourism, and she or he will be thumping the table on our behalf. So thank you for that. And I look forward to speaking to you and talking about that in the near future.
Thank you very much, Graham. And very nice to chat to you as well.